Another horrible, deflating feeling for Sabre fans, provided this time by the Columbus Blue Jackets. More big picture today, a little bit on the game, and also, could the Sabres actually fire somebody mid-season? Everyone that's a Sabre fan is thinking about it and talking about it, so let's get to it. Coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of the show brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Sneaky Joe DiBiase, after a Sabres loss 6-4 at the hands of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus wins the hockey game. A bad team. They were on the road, but not a great start, not a great finish. The Sabres lose this one to drop to 1-4-1 on the season. Sweet. Vibes are great. Feels like the season's over. Is the season over? Not really. When is the season over? I mean, it's up to the beholder, because in reality, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. So you might think that it's over. There's still a chance, though. So, maybe by Halloween, I'll feel more like the season's actually over. And then, you know what? It really does feel like it, though. You lose to Columbus that way. It's just, what's your takeaway supposed to be? What's your takeaway supposed to be other than that? So we'll get to the game. Whether the Sabres could fire somebody mid-season is the question I think the Sabres and their fans would have right now. Like, who could pay for this? What could happen if this season goes off the rails? How bad could it get? Whose jobs would be on the line? What would the future look like if this doesn't work and it continues to look as bad as it has? We'll get to all that. And then, of course, we'll look ahead to some of the games upcoming, including this weekend as the Sabres are in Chicago. If you want to throw me a rant my way, be sure to head up our Locked On Sabres text club. If you want to sign up, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you would like to do that. And looking at this, one rant here, comment. At least Cousins looked a little better tonight. My other Sabres chat saying we should just try out JJ and Kulik and Cousins. Mix that up as the first line since they stunk tonight. Yeah. I'm in. I want to see a different combination in the top six. I'm kind of actually surprised that Lindy Ruff, who was notorious for juggling lines in games too much, hasn't touched the top six really much at all. I mean, Kulik has gone in there. Quinn came out. But when everybody's healthy, it is Tage, Peterka, and Tuck. And then it is Quinn, Cousins, and Benson. And that's basically been the skeleton of the top of the roster since the start of the preseason, the start of training camp, the first day of practice. And that's a month ago now, almost. Like, we haven't seen any change other than the injured changes that you do for a game here and there, a shift here and there. I would like to see them make some bigger changes. I don't mind this idea, putting Peterka down with Cousins. I want to see Tuck with Cousins. I want to keep Peterka with Thompson and let that continue to grow as a relationship on the first line. I would put Tuck on the second line personally, but we'll see if they end up doing anything. A lot of different rants. Here's another one. A lot about, selling the team. And I've wondered out loud, like, are we going to get sell the team chance this year? I don't know how ugly it's really going to get in that arena if they continue to look this bad. They're lucky they are not home for some of these games. Here's another comment. I'd like to see Pegula sell the team as much as the next guy, but I think whomever he sells it to would most likely move the team. We're in a 13-year playoff drought. We're in one of the smallest markets in the NHL, and there are a good 5-10 markets who are bigger that would make more money for an owner. If he were to sell the team, he would have to put a clause in there that the new owner couldn't move the team. I just don't know where we go from here. I want to be angry, but I'm emotionally spent after 6 games. I saw that we lost and just went, oh well, and went to bed. There's one of our texters. And I think that encapsulates a lot of feeling. He went a little more in the weeds on if Pegula did sell the team. I don't think Pegula is going to sell the team, but who knows? I don't know. But today's game world, that might change in years or months. Pegula, I also don't think would ever allow the team to even be at risk of moving if he ever even sold the team, which I don't expect to happen at all. But he's connected to this market. He owns the Bills. It, to me, would be horrible business sense to basically tank the whole market and community against you when you own the biggest business in the market. You can't, it wouldn't make sense. Not to say that the Bills would stop making money for him or the Bills would, have a revolt on their hands. They probably wouldn't, but it just, again, I don't think it makes any sense. Connections when it comes to local government, when it comes to season ticket holders, when it comes to going out about trying to gain more fans, a trust that you have with the market. I just think Pegula would never ever let it get to that point. That he would make sure the team wouldn't move as long as he's here at least. And to be frank, I don't know how he feels about it. He doesn't talk about, and that's his prerogative. He's the owner. Most owners don't speak. Some do, but most don't. So is it criminal? Is it rare that he wouldn't talk about the Sabres? No, not really. Not at all, actually. But I do wonder what he thinks of this because they're run like he doesn't care. Kinda, right? The internal cap questions and, not really making any big changes to the roster, right? Like, I don't know. If you were, when he came in, this idea of him when he came in was somebody that wanted to put a bunch of money into the team and wanted to go make big moves, wanted to go win the Stanley Cup. He wanted to really matter in the league. And where did that come from? It came from his love of the Sabres. It's why he came here in the first place. He was not living in Buffalo at the time, I don't think. I think he was in Florida and Pennsylvania. But he loved the Sabres, so he bought the Sabres. He loved Perreault, he loved Robert, he loved Martin. That's why he bought the team. He wanted to make that team win the Stanley Cup. How come we don't see evidence of that same person right now? How come we don't see evidence that the team is run like that? That the team is desperate to win? That they would even go too far sometimes with their desperation to win, right? Like, we saw that early on. Hey, Christian Ehrhoff's available. 10-year contract. What? The Sabres did what? 10 years? What are they, nuts? That was more like, oh, that's an owner that is, like, obsessed with winning and maybe too much because he's going too far by giving a defenseman a decade-long contract. But I don't see any of that now. They're run like the guy doesn't care about the results of the team. But I also don't know if I want to fully believe that because, again, like, he's supposed to be this massive Sabre fan. That's just dead. That's gone. The fandom is completely gone. Maybe it is because for a lot of Sabre fans, that's what's happened, right? How many Sabre fans in 2011 would have said they were obsessed with the team? They loved the team. And then 13 years later, they would say, oh, man, the Sabres. I don't, this guy or one of our texters, like, didn't even watch the game, saw they lost, went to bed. How many fans are like that now? Maybe that's Terry too. Maybe he's at a loss of what to do. Maybe he just says, you know what? Break even and we're fine. And hopefully one day we'll get good. And I don't know what his attitude is about the team because it's tough to tell. You try to judge him by the actions of the team, and the actions of the team lead you to believe that, there isn't much of a pulse from the organization on this front. So I don't know. That's a lot of the thoughts I have after this loss to Columbus. 6-4. Like, I don't know how much I even want to get into the nitty-gritty of the game itself. A little bit here. We'll do that. Really, the story of this game was, one, you had a bad start. And here's Alex Tuck, one of your assistant captains, who's a veteran on the team, has played in the Stanley Cup Finals. And what's he talking about after the game? No urgency whatsoever. They started terrible and that they didn't really feel like they were ready for the game. How many times have you heard that? How many millions of times do we have to talk about the lack of urgency to start games? Second period, The Sabres got rolling. They got some goals. Ryan McLeod, 9:34 mark. 2 minutes later, goal, Columbus. Exactly, I think it was 2 minutes and 46 seconds later. Adam Fantilli makes it 3-1 after McLeod made it 2-1. It's like, oh, 1-goal game. Nope. Oh, wait. Yuri Kulik, first NHL goal. Nice deflection. He's in front of the net, deflects the Cousins shot into the back of the net. All right. Can I enjoy this? Up 29 seconds later. For those about to rock. Cannon off. Bam. Matthew Oliver makes it 4-2. You got 29 seconds, feeling like it was a game again. Down 1. Then Owen Power scores. 25 seconds left in the second period. Like, all right, third period. You got a full period to come out hot and tie the hockey game. You got 20 minutes to do it. Let's go. They're not going to lose this game to Columbus. For those about to... Zach Aston Reese. Cannon goes off 15 seconds in to the third period. 5-3. 5-3. And then you felt like it was over. 6-3, Damon Severson. 8-minute mark at the third period. Paterka got some garbage time goal at the end. That was the story of the game, was they didn't start well. And then every time they tried to crawl back into the game, it's like they took a breath. It's like they were playing helter-skelter. They got their way back into a 1-goal game. Then they exhaled. And bam, the Blue Jackets would take the lead right back again. And that happened on 3 separate occasions. That's the story of the game. And that's a Columbus team who is not very talented right now, the way they are built. They are in a bit of a rebuild. And they looked like the better hockey team last night, and that should not happen. I don't know how that happens. Well, one reason that it could, and this is kind of my takeaway from a game like this, Alex talking about urgency and how they're not ready to play. Listen, I think there have been like 900 hockey games during this playoff drought. Every time after one of the losses of the 600 losses, every night a Sabre has had to talk at a podium or at a microphone and explain why they lost. And not one time in all, I should get the exact number. How many losses do they have in the drought at this point? However many hundreds of losses they've had in the drought. Every night after a Sabre player's had to explain that loss, you have not once ever heard that it was a talent problem, that they weren't talented enough, because you're never going to hear players talk like that. That's what it is. That's what it is to me. They are not as talented as they think they are, as we think they are, as the GM thinks they are. They're not. I don't think they're that talented of a group. That's what it is. I just don't think they're talented enough. I don't think their best players are as good as a lot of other teams' best players. Now, last night's a game where you should have that advantage because your best players are better than Columbus's best players. But on a night-to-night basis, for the most part, I just don't think the Sabres are all that talented. So they can try to work hard all they want, and sometimes maybe they'll do it, and they'll lose. And sometimes they won't, and then they'll get hammered or lose to bad teams. But I think the core problem here is their core, and I include them all: Dahlin, Thompson, Power, Tuck, Benson, Cousins, Samuelson. Geez, him right now, terrible. All of them. They're just not as talented a core as other teams' cores. That's where I'm at. I just don't think they're talented enough. When we come back, with that being said, see him getting fired? What's going to happen? A lot of people are asking me about who gets fired, who falls on the sword for this. Let's find out. Let's figure this out together. Let's talk about it. Could they make a mid-season firing? It's coming back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's not going well if you're betting the Sabres right now, but, you know, it could get better, and it probably will get better. They're favored tomorrow in Chicago, so a chance to get back on track, and you get a homestand after that. It's not just hockey, baseball playoffs. Holy cow, if you bet the Guardians last night, congratulations, because what a thrilling win that was. And you've got NFL football. Last night, those Broncos with a big win. I was on that end of things, thinking that they were a good bet and to win because they're playing a backup offense. So they did. NFL fans, you could start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can check it all out over at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. A lot of fans are talking about one topic with the Buffalo Sabres as they start 1-4. The first 6 games have gone as poorly as you could possibly imagine. And it is, are they going to fire somebody? Wake me up when they fire somebody was a text I got in our Locked On Sabres text club last night. Wake me up when they fire somebody. So that's the question. Do you think they're going to do it? Do you think they are going to fire somebody during the year? Well, 2 schools of thought. 2 guesses on my part on this. It really could go either direction. I would want to say up front, I'm not so sure they wouldn't. That's what I would want to say. I'm not so sure they wouldn't do it. And part of my thesis on that is they do act sometimes. Not as often as you might like, but sometimes. I did not think they were going to fire Don Granato. I thought Don Granato was going to be this team's head coach right now, and he's not. They acted on that. They wanted a veteran coach. They went out. They fired him, even though they just paid him. They are still paying him, and they hired Lindy Ruff. So, could they fire Kevyn Adams, who's the right name to mention here, midseason? My gut says no, but my gut didn't think they'd fire Granato, and they did fire Granato. 2, we did see a lot of reports, rumors from Elliot Friedman before the season began about pressure on Sabres management and how the Sabres know that they have to win this year or there are going to be massive changes. There are going to be big changes. And I would just like to know what those big changes are going to be because they've already made the big change at head coach. They made the change. Granato's gone, Lindy's in. So firing Lindy could be it, but for what? You're going to fire Lindy and just promote Seth Appert? That doesn't, to me, count as massive change. To me, the general manager has got to be who he's talking about. And that was in the summer. If that's to be taken seriously, that Friedman knows from people in the league, hey, if that doesn't go well in Buffalo, heads are going to be on spikes. Then I'm thinking that it could happen mid-year. Because that means if that's true, again, I'm not sure it's true. Chad DiDomenicis expected Buffalo, poured a little cold water on that theory this week that, he made a comment on his podcast, Expected Buffalo, about how Pegula likes the Sabres run a certain way. And that was all the detail he had on that. But that almost to me sounds like it implies that they like the way Adams runs the team. Maybe that's an internal cap, by the way, comment. I don't know what it is in detail, but he likes the Sabres run a certain way. So maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they just keep going with Adams and see this thing through for another year. After that, I don't know. Maybe it could be like when Dick Duran was the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, and it's like 7-9 every year was enough for him to get a contract extension, where Adams would be like, oh yeah, you get 80 points. You're fine. You can stick around. That's our bar. You cleared it. You're good. Get to 80 points. You don't have to make the playoffs. So that's a school of thought, but let's for sake of conversation say Friedman's on it. Friedman's got someone in the league, or it's people in the league that know if it doesn't go well that he's getting fired. If your finger's already on the button, why couldn't you just do it in November? Why couldn't you just do it in December? And it's not like, I know this is like it feels like a whole totally different era because it is a decade ago. But the Buffalo Sabres did, under Terry Pegula, once fire a GM very early in the season when Darcy Regier was let go. And Regier, there were fire Regier chants in the arena, like early in that 2013-14 season. Regier was fired on November 13th of 2013. He was fired very early on in that season. So there is some precedent here. under Pegula ownership that they would make a move like that early on in the year. Then they hired Pat LaFontaine at that point in time. So that would be kind of my overall thought on this, is that I don't want to say they couldn't. I feel like they could do it. If it gets ugly enough, if they go lose to Chicago and then they go 1-3 on this homestand, and they're sitting at like, if they're sitting at like 2-9, 2-8-1 after 11 games, like maybe that's all it would take. That would get you into November. If they're like in last place by December or somewhere in November, I'm telling you, I think they could do it. I would not bet on it. I would not bet on them doing it, but I wouldn't want to rule it out. I know it feels like they're asleep at the wheel sometimes, the Sabres as an organization, but I think once in a while they do kind of like, whoa, wake up, and they realize the car's going off the side of the road, and they do try to steer it back into the middle of the road once in a while. And maybe this would be one of those once in a while. So if you're calling for Kevyn Adams' head and saying, wake me up when they fire him, or they should fire him, you're not going to hear, I'm going to try not to have it come from me. I mean, maybe we hear others that know more internally about the Sabres, because I'm not like, reporting news about the Sabres internally. I'm just not going to be the one to tell you, oh, no, they never fire a guy. Oh, they never fire a guy midseason. They never fire Kevyn Adams midseason. Shoulder shrug. I'm not sure. Maybe they could. To my opinion on it real quick, I would do it. I don't know what else. It's because I don't know what the other move is. Everyone's locked up. Thompson's locked up. Dahlin's locked up. Power's locked up. Samuelson's locked up. Cousins is locked up. They're all locked up. Your core is here. You have to make it work. And your coach is Lindy Ruff. I don't know how much better you could do than Lindy Ruff as head coach because of what the organizational reputation is. I would fire Kevyn Adams. My concern comes from what they would do after. Because if it were me, they were the owner of the Buffalo Sabres, I would go try to hire a veteran hockey mind. I always come back to Brian Burke for this. He's not maybe my favorite idea, but a guy like a Brian Burke, maybe one that's not coming right to mind for me off the top of my head, but a guy like that. I'm afraid of what they would do after, though. Although maybe I shouldn't be, now that I'm thinking about it, because they might just promote from within. Is that such a bad thing? Promoting from within would mean what? That would mean Jason Karmanos would become the Sabres general manager. And Jason Karmanos, who I like because he's a numbers guy, or he helped build numbers departments. Jason Karmanos was someone 2 years ago that was getting some interest in league circles for general manager jobs. He didn't get one, but it looked like 2 years ago he might be a guy they lose eventually. Well, he's their assistant general manager still. And he's still the same hockey mind to me. He is still the guy that was the assistant GM of the Carolina Hurricanes for a long time when they really started getting good. He was the VP of hockey operations for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the mid-2000s when they were winning mid-2010s when they were winning Stanley Cups. So that resume, if he were out there in the wilderness right now, not on the Sabres organizational depth chart, he'd be someone I'd be like, okay, I could get talked into this pretty easily. So maybe I shouldn't be so against, they're going to promote from within if they fire Kevyn Adams, because I do think Karmanos being the GM would not be the worst thing in the world. Or hey, maybe they go Moneyball, right? Maybe they go Moneyball here and they promote Sam Ventura, a numbers guy, data guy, to the Sabres job. He's the VP of hockey strategy. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Who should they actually? Do we want to do this yet? Sure, go ahead. In our text club, Twitter, if you got a name, because I don't really have a favorite name right now. I haven't thought enough about Adams getting fired yet for this. Maybe I will soon. Let me know if you've got, if you're in your head screaming at me, or you're listening in your car right now or on the treadmill and you're yelling a name out loud. There's a name in your head, oh, make him the GM, make him the GM. Let me know who you think. All right, when we come back, what's ahead for the Sabres in the next couple of games? They do have an opportunity to get some wins here. They just got to do it, man. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by Gametime. Homestand coming up. So if you want to go see the Sabres against Dallas or Detroit or Florida or the New York Islanders, which are all coming up next week, check it all out on the Gametime app. Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks. Makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff, shows you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Gametime has all-in pricing, shows you the exact total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, you get a panoramic view of your seat on the app before you buy. They have a lowest price guarantee. If you find a ticket for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. This episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast also brought to you by PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today, get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Think Justin Jefferson more or less than 85 yards this week for Minnesota. PrizePicks, the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds. Turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app, code LOCKEDONNHL, you get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Check out PrizePicks. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres have one more game this weekend, and then it is back home. So one more game on the road here. At Chicago, Saturday night against the Blackhawks. That's an 8 o'clock puck drop for the Sabres. Now, Chicago is not a very good hockey team. They are still in a rebuild phase, very much so. And this year, they're off to, an S start, 2-2-1 on the year. Their goal differential on the year is +1s. They're playing right up around even there. And if you look at some of their team stats on the year, for Chicago, Connor Bedard starting very strong, 7 points in 5 games, over a point per game. Teuvo Teravainen's over a point per game for them. They have a veteran team. They have a lot of older guys that are kind of past the prime, like Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, TJ Brody, Alex Vlasic. Sorry, it's Alex Vlasic, different player. Tyler Bertuzzi this year as well. Pat Maroon is on the Blackhawks. Just Andre Athanasiou. There's a lot of older mid veterans on this team, but it's the Bedard show. Bedard is electric, and you can't let him beat you. So Bedard is the guy to watch, of course, for Chicago. No surprise there. Peter Mrazek is the star goalie, the top goalie. Shouldn't call him star goalie. Peter Mrazek, the top goalie this year. Good start to the year for him. Has saved 102 saves on 112 shots. So pretty good numbers for him on the season so far. But Chicago's not a great team. It's kind of like Columbus. Sure, they're off to a half-decent start, but that's a team you should be more talented than. So you got to get a win against Chicago, or it's just going to be further and further we're digging this hole. And then a 4-game homestand. So let's put those 5 games together. You got a game against a bad team on the road, and then 4 home games. And I would say 2 of them are against lesser teams, Detroit and the Islanders, and 2 of them are against better teams, Florida and Dallas. To feel good again about this team, I'm going to want to see 7 of 10 points. 7 of 10. That's my bar. That you have out of a 5-game stretch, you got a really bad team you're playing in 4 home games, you should be able to get 7 out of 10 points. That's my bar for the Buffalo Sabres. I think Luukkonen probably is going to be the starting goalie tomorrow night against Chicago. And you might not see Levi for a little bit. I wonder how many of these 5 games he gets. Maybe it's only 1, because the Sabres go here Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Monday, Friday. That's the next 2 weeks. There's no back-to-backs in there. There's hardly even games within 2 days of each other. So I think Levi maybe gets like the Florida game at home again. So maybe you see Luukkonen the next couple if he plays well. If Luukkonen looks bad, he'll have 6 goals, and maybe he just tries Levi out again. So we'll see what the goalie rotation looks like. It might be our first real test, because there are no back-to-backs, of Lindy's plan for Luukkonen and Levi. But let's see who's playing well in the first place. All right, it's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Again, if you got a GM idea that you're loving, throw it my way. We'll start talking about GMs maybe, because, again, I'm thinking it's possible the Sabres move on from Adams during the year. I'm not sure. All right, it's good for us today here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Be sure to check out Locked On Bills ahead of the Titans game on Sunday with Joe Marino. Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Make that a good listen as well. You got to get your wins in fantasy hockey this year. Check it all out wherever you get your podcast with Steal and Flip. Thanks for listening. This has been the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.